but if you asked all the people in the last, I don't know, month or two in the B2B marketing world on LinkedIn who have posted about customer research, if you ask them how many of them actually followed through on it, I think you'd be very surprised and you'd laugh at how few of them followed through on it. Thanks for having me, Zach. I feel a little underdressed with your Friday podcasting shirt. I should go to my closet right now.
Yeah, well, like I said before we start recording, I had to upgrade from the pajama hoodie to the to the.
Well, it's a sick upgrade. So well done.
Well, thank you. So Mark, I'd love to start off just like tell us a little bit. First, I'd like to hear just kind of about your kind of career as a marketer up to this
Mhm.
point. And then I'd love to jump into what you're doing at User Evidence. But can you kick us off? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I always make this joke that if you were to look at my LinkedIn profile and see the job history, you'd probably think to yourself, does this guy have any idea what he wants to do in marketing? He was in consulting, then he was in digital marketing, then he was in marketing ops and growth and demand gen and product marketing, and now he's a VP of marketing. And at surface level, you're not wrong, but also I never thought that going back to school to get an MBA in marketing, given what I wanted to do, made sense. So what I really did was I created my own little I would say B2B SaaS marketing MBA by doing stints in all of these different functions that have allowed me to really do the work, learn, and see how all of these different pieces fit together to build a modern marketing function. So, if anything, I love being a generalist. I love all the experiences that I've had because they've uh, taught me a lot to get to this point, and it's fun. There's a lot, and there's a whole lot that goes on in B2B marketing that I don't think most people realize.
Yeah, and I think being a generalist, just given the pace that like digital marketing in general is moving at, sometimes it really pays to be a generalist because you're not kind of stuck in one bucket, and then all of a sudden some innovation comes along that either obsoletes that or makes it a much smaller part of the marketing stack. So I can totally relate as a marketer at a startup myself. You're kind of a generalist by necessity, where
Yeah.
currently there's one of me. So
Well, I think there's
think
this bad, like, negative connotation about being a generalist in B2B marketing, truthfully. Like, I think a lot of people talk about it as if it's a bad thing. Like, you need to go down the specialist route, and you totally can if you want to, and that's what is interesting to you. But I don't think there should be a bad connotation around what being a generalist is because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah, and I guess for the everyone on this call, we are aligned on that. So consensus, 100%. So can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing currently at User Evidence, and then I'd love to talk about what User Evidence itself does. But tell us what you're doing.
Yep. So I'd say that explanation is probably a little harder. No, I'm kidding. I'm standing up a marketing function from scratch. I'm just about a little over 7 months into the role. And prior to me joining, User Evidence had worked with a marketing agency for, I think, a little bit over a year, but none of the foundational elements of what real solid B2B marketing is were in place. So I've spent a ton of time from the moment I joined last July to today on product marketing, on marketing operations, and really getting content marketing and that engine started. So those are the big things that I lose sleep about on top of all of the other pipeline oriented things like demand gen, events, you name it. And I'm really excited because I'm about to hire the second full-time marketer in the next couple of days here. So we've got a final round of interview presentations later today. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, and marketing is about to 2x every single thing that I've been doing for the last 7 months. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's super exciting. You're gonna grow your team by 100%. And it's funny. I swear we didn't set this up beforehand, but I too am standing up a marketing function from scratch. I've been at my company 7 months now.
All right,
So
this is weird now.
no, all we need is for you to be like, actually, I'm wearing the same shirt underneath my
Yeah,
hoodie.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, when you were telling that story, I totally feel you. I know kind of the struggles and the trials that you have to go through to do that. We're also pretty early stage, which comes with its own set of
Yep.
challenges and opportunities, but a lot of challenges. Um, so yeah, that all man, that all really hit home for me.
That's
So
awesome.
I guess so. Where I'd like to kind of go with this is, talking about what you guys do at User Evidence, and you have a really nice kind of tagline that I saw, which is "Turn happy customers into your best sellers." I don't know if you came up with that, but that's a good one. Um,
The marketing team that you are looking at did come up with that. So thank you. Yeah.
so, can you just tell us a little bit about kind of what's the what do you do at User Evidence, and why is it useful to go to market teams, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about what is going on in the market and what has been going on in the market and really anchor the problem that we solve around that. So if you think back over the course of the last, I don't know, let's say 5-ish years during really some of the boom times in B2B SaaS, everyone was buying, every tool that they had budget for. There was very little scrutiny over what tools were being bought, and you know, you could make mistakes and sometimes not get in trouble for buying the wrong tools. Well, the reality is, so many of the tools that people bought didn't ever work out as the buyers wanted them to, or the way that they were sold and kind of overpromised. So now fast forward to 2024 and all of the scrutiny and budget cuts and you name it, buying software these days is a very scary process because no one wants to put a target on their back if they buy the wrong tools. So the last couple of years, you'd really listen to what vendors would tell you and you would try to take that at surface level. And what everyone realized, and oftentimes by learning that the hard way, was I don't really trust vendors anymore. I'd rather trust people who look like me, sound like me, are in my role, are in my industry. Like, I want to see examples of people who are at the same exact company stage, or where they are in their trajectory as I am. And vendors have realized that, but then what they've also realized is there's no real solid way to collect customer stories. Now, most people think of customer stories as case studies and testimonials, and if you've got a big budget, maybe even analyst reports. And what user evidence does is it kind of bridges the gap between the scale option. So if you think of review sites like a G2, Trust Radius, Gartner Peer Insights, you can get a lot of reviews, but you don't really have a lot of control over that. And, does it cost a whole lot? No. Does it scale? It can. Or you go to the other extreme, which is the quality route. You go spending well into the six figures on a analyst report. You can spend a lot of money doing high quality videos, or you focus writing long format case studies on a handful of customers, and you still don't have enough customer stories and customer evidence at the end of the day. So our platform lets you send surveys throughout the customer journey so that you're always collecting verified customer proof points, customer evidence, ROI stats, product data, you name it, that are, for lack of a better term, like bite-sized social proof that are a little bit more believable. They're verified by actual customers, and it's what people want today to make sure that they're not making the wrong mistake when they buy tools.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense, especially with the kind of SaaS recession or whatever you want to call it that we've been in.
Mm-hmm.
All the people are double checking and triple checking when when they're making these purchases, so they're not the
Yep.
one um, who has like their head on the chopping block when some vendor goes south or whatever the case may
Yep.
be. Um, and I mean this really resonates with me, just given what we do at our company. A lot of times people are kind of faced with the choice of, well, you can have the depth, or you can have the scale, right? And with
Yep.
depth comes, it's a lot slower, it's a lot more expensive, and with scale, and maybe the quality is not there, something like that. And so, kind of trying to find that sweet spot where you can really enable those kind of high quality
Mm-hmm.
test social proof, but at a scale that's actually substantial. Um, so yeah, that also hits home for me. Um, so one thing I'd like to kind of understand about your kind of customers is,
Mm-hmm.
what is the trigger for them? So everything you just said, it makes perfect sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
People need better testimonials from actual people, not some analyst report.
Yep.
Um, but what's the trigger that kind of brings them knocking on your door, aside from, I'm sure, your
Mm-hmm.
fabulous marketing? Is what are they saying internally where they're like, they kind of look around, they say, man, we really need more voice of the customer in our social proof. We need to like to kind of start
Mhm.
capturing insights at scale. Do you have a sense of what that kind of trigger is?
Yeah, there's a couple of them, but I think the biggest one, or the one that's easiest to understand, is when your sales team is using and reusing the same, maybe handful of referenceable customer stories that you have for every single conversation they're having. So if you think of, we typically sell into B2B software companies, or hardware and product companies as well. But if you think of all the different products that those companies have, the different market segments being SMB, mid market, and enterprise, the different geos that they might be selling in. If you start to do kind of the permutation of, 5 times 20 times 60 times whatever, you then get a really large number for all of the different use cases that you need content and customer stories for. And if you're using the same five and hoping that those proof points are going to help you actually win more deals, you're lying to yourself. So I think that's really the big light bulb moment that companies have before they reach out to us. And then one of the other things that we're seeing, I would say over the last probably 3 to 4 months, is mandates from the top down, usually on leadership teams, who have said, we need more customer stories. And then they throw out some absolutely insane number of go generate 100 customer stories in the next 2 quarters. And then you think back to, well, we've been using the same 6 case studies for the last 6 months. How are we going to go generate 100 in 2 quarters? So those are, I'd say, that the two big triggers for us right now. And there's a few more as well.
Yeah. Um, it kind of brings up a related item that I wanted to ask you about, which is just kind of the trend towards more personalization in marketing. So not just in social proof, but you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
talking about instead of having a handful of broad case studies and basically trying to fit every customer into that bucket, where
Mm-hmm.
who you are, one of these five like kind of needs to apply. That's all
Yep.
the firepower we really have. So
Yep.
if SMB, like I'm gonna kind of blast you with this enterprise case study, no matter what, or whatever the
Yep.
case. Um, so that makes perfect sense when it comes to social proof. You want to tell your prospects a story that really lands with them, and they can look at kind of your case study and say, "Oh my gosh, that's me." That
Yep.
and it worked for them, so it's going to work for me. Do you see kind of just in marketing generally, do you see a trend towards more personalization like this, or leveraging more kind of customer insights throughout kind of the marketing lifecycle?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think if you're not doing that and have not been doing that for the last few years now, people don't really take your marketing seriously. I think if anything, they want to see like a very focused and targeted approach. And I think targeting and hyper targeting and all these buzzwords that people in B2B marketing love to use, they've been saying the same thing for the last 10 years now. And very few people have been able to truly offer that personalized experience. So, if you think of a company like Mutiny, who does website personalization in real time, there are ways that you can then personalize, what you see on the website, whether it's testimonials, the case studies, the logos that you're seeing in a row of customer logos. You can do that based on all these different attributes that each company is made up of, and you can also provide customer stories to match those same attributes. So yeah, I think people want to see a personalized experience. I think very few companies deliver that personalized experience, and I think a few years from now, if you're not delivering personalized experiences, I think your buyers are just going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, and so I think you're in kind of a interesting place where you see the value of that personalization, and you're also working at a company that provides that kind of a level of
Mhm.
personalization for companies in their social proof. What's your take on kind of the current methods for getting the customer insights to deliver that kind of personalization, kind of in your go-to-market motion broadly? So this could be for you, how
Mhm.
you're generating customer insights, or just what you're seeing in general. Like,
Yep.
how are people sourcing these insights to make use of them and personalize their marketing in this way?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is just going about finding the insights and actually getting to hear from customers. If you think of how most companies do this, and they're doing it manually, they're reliant on their customer success manager to make an intro when they say, hey, we are having a product launch in a couple months from now. We need a few proof points and case studies and ROI stats from customers that fit this criteria. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. CSM, can you go introduce me to one of those accounts that you own that fits this? And what you usually hear is, yeah, now's not a good time to intro you. They're not happy or they're approaching the renewal. And, let me just get back to you in a couple months. So you, as a marketer, oftentimes don't have access to these people and the accounts that you want to get these insights from. So those that do try to be a little bit more prescriptive around, hey, I need, this from this segment, from this industry for this use case. And it takes a ton of manual work. I think oftentimes it lives in fairly organized spreadsheets that, the product marketer is super happy when they finish it. And then what usually happens is very few people on the go-to-market team end up ever looking for it or using it. And then they rely on the same list of references, for all these different use cases. So I don't think there's truly a good way to go about this manually right now. It's painful, it's time consuming, it's definitely frustrating. And I think those that have gone at this manually and have all of these, pieces of customer evidence, props to them, because that takes a considerable amount of time and effort and really persistence.
Yeah, and that actually echoes, unfortunately, what I've heard from other guests on the show, which is, we're talking about doing customer research, customer interviews, and I kind of ask, hey, what are the main barriers to getting this kind of research done in a lot of organizations? And one that I remember is just sales won't let us, customer
Yeah.
success won't let us, right?
Yep.
And it's not for no reason. I mean, they're trying to make sure that they get to that renewal
Oh,
or
they have great reasons, but
yeah,
they control the access to the customer.
yeah. And so yeah, it makes perfect sense on the one hand, but on the other hand, when you look at kind of the trend that you have
Mhm.
identified, increasing personalization, hyper targeted marketing, whatever you want to call it, uh, that can only be driven, in my view, by a really deep understanding of not just a handful of your customers, but kind
Mhm.
of all of your customers broadly speaking, right? And
Mhm.
that's something that it's interesting to talk to you about because you're kind of in the business of sourcing
Mhm.
those when it comes to social proof, but you're also a marketer yourself, and so it's just interesting to kind of get your take on how easy or not it is to actually generate those insights at scale in the way that businesses need.
Well, here's an example that we see happen all the time. So oftentimes, product marketers are always trying to find new customer stories for why some of the new customers that you have chose your solution over, your direct competitor or somebody that you come up against all the time. Makes total sense. I totally understand why sales would need that. Now, when you try to go source those insights, what often happens is you run a report in Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever you're using, and you find a list of customers who previously came from, X or Y solution and ended up buying your solution. So then you go and you try to email them, you try to get a call with them asking, hey, why did you switch from, X to, my solution? Well, if they bought your solution 2 years ago, do you think that they're really going to remember what went into that evaluation process and why they actually needed it? So what we do now is we try to find, your customers where they are in their journey of using your product. So we'll trigger, it's really survey based, but we'll trigger different surveys at key milestones throughout their entire life cycle. So maybe it's right after they signed a contract and technically they became a customer. Well, let's then trigger a survey that asks them a few questions around what went into their evaluation process, why they went with us, how they're measuring success, that sort of thing. Maybe you trigger another one a couple weeks or months later as soon as onboarding and implementation is done. And then you ask a survey that's very specific to that experience and, you know, anything that you can improve on there. Maybe you trigger another one, a couple months down the line when there's another big milestone, or trigger one after the next, EBR or before the renewal. And then that way, one, it's all automated because you're triggering these things throughout the life cycle. But then two, you're more likely to get better customer evidence if you're asking them like right in the moment that whatever they're experiencing is what you're trying to get the social proof on, not something that happened, 2+ years ago.
Yeah, and that should make intuitive sense to basically anyone who's listening. It's like if I ask you, "Hey, what did you have for breakfast 2 years ago?" It's like, you're not gonna
Yeah, exactly. I can barely understand what I had breakfast for like 3 days ago, let alone 2 years.
yeah, or this morning, depending on how tired I am.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect intuitive sense, and what I'm hearing is it really aligns with a theme that I'm seeing, kind of crop up in the research space generally, but I don't know that it's made its way to kind of like the mainstream marketing space, which is that customer research should really be kind of an always on function. And what you're describing is like, honestly, it's just kind of music to my ears because you're saying, hey, we're measuring this in the moment. So I'm not asking you, what were you thinking 6 months, 2 years ago? You're measuring in the moment on a consistent cadence at these kind of key moments in the adoption journey of the buying journey, so that you have actual customer data at all of those key points. And maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I feel like, or something that I hear a lot is that organizational leaders will sometimes say, "No, we know our customer, we understand our customer, or we did research last quarter, and so actually, we're good."
No, that would never happen. Somebody would say that. Happens every single week, every quarter. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's your take on like the role? I mean, I can assume that I know what your take is, but if we're trending towards this like kind of more personalized, um, you know, marketing paradigm, how does customer research or, surveying your customers, whatever you want to call it, how does that need to evolve in terms of cadence, in terms of, when and how we're talking to them?
Yeah. So you mentioned always on, and it's funny because that's actually something that we include as a core part of our messaging. So we talk about this concept of always on surveying and always on feedback. And I think what happens a lot of times is, whether it's marketing leaders, go to market leaders, whatever you want to call them, they say, "Oh yeah, we did our customer research. We had a project on this, last year or a couple months ago." And it's like this set it and forget it type activity. So much changes in the B2B world and the B2B software world, every quarter, that to think that just because you did a research project last year means that you have a really solid understanding of your customers today, like absolutely not. So I think for us, we're having to educate really the market and people that we're talking to that you should be collecting feedback throughout, you know, the entire year, quarter, you name it, and automating it by way of our product as opposed to these manual, chaotic, end of quarter or end of reporting period moments where then you don't have enough time, you're scrambling on top of the 90 other things that you have to do on a daily basis. And again, you don't really get good outputs at the end of the day. So yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people talk about and it's like, oh yeah, go talk to your customers or go research them. One, very few people follow through on it. And I think the majority that do, they don't do it nearly as often as they should because it's so time consuming.
Yeah. Um, and I mean, that's but then people are frustrated because somewhere down the line they're saying, hey, we're missing our revenue targets, or, we're seeing a lot of churn. We're seeing, sort of these pitfalls. And you can often trace it back to, well, we tried to, we tried to do the research. We tried to have,
Yep.
operate from a foundation of insights that would kind of mitigate these pitfalls, but sometimes it's too little, too late. But it's incredible to hear the way that you're really advocating for and kind of educating folks on the value of
Yep.
having as like an always on function. Also, I promise I didn't steal that.
No,
um,
I'm
but
going to
I
steal your shirt so you can steal that from me. All good.
um, so actually, one more thing I just wanted to get your thoughts on is kind of the value of sourcing qualitative customer feedback as opposed to something more simple to measure, like how many stars do you give us? What's your sort of your NPS, right? Because presumably, if you're building software, it's a lot easier to measure quant metrics, right?
Mhm.
So is it about qualitative that kind of hits different when it comes to like really resonating with potential buyers?
Yeah, I think there's, this desire to quantify everything, at least in the B2B marketing world. And there has been up until I would say the last like maybe year or two when people really started to come around on qualitative feedback and the types of truly valuable insights that you can take away from qualitative responses and surveys and Slack comments and email replies and you name it. And I put, I would say, just as much value in the qualitative side of things because if you hear from your, best ICP fit company and it is your core buyer persona and they're giving you some tough love and telling you things about your product that, isn't working the way that it should, that's not going to show up in a quantifiable survey, but you really have to read into the qualitative, things and still act on them. And I think specifically for product marketing, I think for product functions, I think for customer success functions, like there's so much value in qualitative feedback that I'm a big believer in. And I hope that the rest of the market starts to believe just as much in as well, instead of over obsessing over the stuff that you can quantify.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, and what you said kind of reminds me of we heard from an executive who was a customer of ours at some point who told us like, hey, using quant metrics, it's super easy to understand like what's working and what's not on the surface. If their example was a red sweater, if I go into the store and I can see that red sweaters aren't selling, or I can see that it gets a 1-star review or whatever, but until I know why, I can't make that product any better. So is it too itchy? Is the fit bad? Is the price too high? And so once you get into the kind of qualitative nature that underlies, maybe those tough love ratings, like you call it, then you
Mhm.
can actually surface actionable insights to make the product better, make content that resonates more strongly with your customers or what have you. And so I too hope that that trend kind of continues, and I think that in the paradigm that we've kind of talked about, which is that everything's becoming more and more personalized, you can't really do that on the basics of like generic quantitative ratings. It just doesn't seem to work in my mind.
No, absolutely not. And I think people's first inclination when they see a lot of those quantifiable stats is, how did you get here? Who did you poll? Who did you get these responses from? And is I would say for me personally, is a overarching stat on something as powerful as somebody who has the same title as me, works in the same industry, and is at a similar company stage? Like, no, like I'd rather hear something that's more qualitative from that person and company that is basically where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I think that you can also see that just kind of borne out in the way that marketing has evolved in the last handful of years, which is so many more people are driven by what they're hearing in private Slack communities or word of mouth from their buddy who works in a similar role at, XYZ company. And the buying journey has gotten a lot more nonlinear. It's gotten a lot more hard to scrutinize. So that's a
Yep.
challenge for marketers. But when you kind of understand what's driving that, it's people want to hear from people who are similar to them, resonate with them, use the same language. And so I think to the extent that businesses can actually understand those things and capture those insights, their marketing, their products, what have you, are just going to be all the stronger for it. Um,
Absolutely.
so kind of a last main question here, and then I have a couple rapid fires for the end. But I can't have one of these conversations without asking folks kind of what their take on AI is in the role of customer research, marketing. Um, you are welcome to go the full spectrum of I hate it to I love it to it's the future to it's a fad and everything in between. But I just love to talk to folks who are really deep in
Mhm.
in marketing or in research and kind of see how they're evaluating it as a tool.
Yeah, I think for me, it's something that, I don't know nearly as much about it as I should. I have a desire to use it more and see what works and what doesn't work. But I'd be lying to you if I said that, I've got it all figured out. And I think most people would be lying too, given how fast AI is changing at this point in time. But for me, especially in a marketing role, like I love experimenting with new tools and different types of tools that can make, my day to day easier or can help me do things better, faster, whatever it may be. So I'm very open to using AI more in customer research. I just don't think that I've gotten to that point yet. I'm using Chat GPT for a whole lot more than I ever thought that I would at this point in time. Some of it works well, some of it doesn't, but I think it's only as good as the upfront time that you put into it. And when you do put the upfront time in, you end up getting a noticeably better output or outcome.
Yeah, that's pretty much consistent with what I've heard from, basically everyone I've had on the show, which is no one comes in and says, "Yep, it's the magic pill that you take once and then, your job is easy forever after." It's more, yeah, there's a lot it can do, a lot it still can't do. People are figuring it out. And like you said, you do have to put in quite a bit of time up front to figure out how it's going to work for you. So that makes total sense to me. Um, so I have a couple rapid fire questions. I know we're coming up on time here, so can I just fire off a couple of these and then we'll wrap?
I love it. Let's do it.
Cool. So I like to ask, can you give me your spiciest take on either customer research or marketing? You're kind of perfectly the intersection of both. If you have a
I
hot
mean,
take,
the first one that comes to mind is customer research. I think it's so popular to talk about it and to do it or say that oh, you should do customer research on LinkedIn. Very few people actually follow through on it and do it. So I think it's very popular and trendy to say and recommend. But if you asked, I don't know how you'd be able to do this, but if you asked all the people in the last, I don't know, month or two in the B2B marketing world on LinkedIn who have posted about customer research, if you asked them how many of them actually followed through on it, I think you'd be very surprised and you'd laugh at how few of them followed through on it.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of become a meme at this point where it's like, talk to customers, and it's just
Yeah,
like, but
exactly.
do you? But when have you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, and that rings very true to me as well. Uh, Next question would be, what advice do you have for go-to-market teams who want to be more customer-centric, broadly speaking? Um,
Yeah, I think the where my mind goes initially is something that I did in the early days of when I was at my last company. It was a company called Metadata. We had a customer advisory board and we started really small with, I would say, somewhere in the range of like 6 to maybe 10 of our best fit customers and the core power users of our tool. And we would meet with them monthly and we would pick their brain. And I think doing something like that and getting regular feedback from the right companies and the right types of people at those companies based on your business was invaluable. You can ask them questions about every single go to market related thing possible. And what we would do is we'd ask a lot of dumb questions that we would then get answers to, and we would stop planning or rolling out whatever we were about to do because they corrected us. But we would use that as almost a mini focus group to test these ideas out so that when we ended up rolling out, a new pricing change, a new product, a new feature, a new marketing campaign, that we already knew it was going to land because it had landed in that focus group of, 6 to 10 customers.
yeah, talking to customers, it's basically the cheat code. It's like you can kind of get the answers to the test before you take the test if
Yep.
you know where to look and who to talk to. And so I think that's totally brilliant. Is yeah, you can find those folks who are already advocates for your product and want to see you do well, want to see the product get better, and then just leverage those insights to, crush it when you go to market more broadly. So that's a great one. Uh, Last one here, probably super easy. Is can you just tell us where folks can find you online? You obviously have a ton of great insights. I'm sure people would love to follow you wherever you are online, LinkedIn or otherwise. So
Yeah,
uh,
find me on LinkedIn. I usually hang out there, not as much as I used to because I got a whole lot going on as a first-time VP of marketing, but I am pretty active on LinkedIn and I get quite a few DMs with people who have questions that, I myself had those same exact questions a couple years ago, and I would do the same thing that those people are doing, which is reach out to others that they, look up to or want to hear from. And all the people that I did that to when I was earlier on my career, answered me. So I love paying it forward.
yeah, and you certainly have. I mean, I was one of those guys who DM'd you on LinkedIn and you want to come on my podcast. So I totally appreciate it. I would encourage everyone to go follow you on LinkedIn. And yeah, Thank you so much for being here, for answering my DM and this has been super fun, and I just really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Zach.